Okay. I literally just finished like my other reading vlog this morning and I'm like, I feel motivated to do things. So, welcome to my kitchen that I just cleaned. So, first and foremost, reading vlog. So, I'm currently listening to the audiobook of Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism. I'm probably going to finish that audiobook in a day because it's only like 8 hours long, and then of course if you listen to it at a faster speed. So yeah, it's interesting. It's very digestible. It is of course what it is, the language of fanaticism, so it focuses on like true cults to, cult-ish things such as like Alcoholics Anonymous or CrossFit or, cult beauty products. And it's really like examining language and words and the power of words and it kind of goes into like a little bit of psychology and a little bit of like cultural context, but it is very much like a linguistic study, but it's not super deeply academic, and I enjoy it. I feel like it's not going to be a 5-star for me, definitely so far like a solid 4-star, just because like it's almost like a little too digestible. I want like more personal narrative, not necessarily like the author's narrative, but maybe like something like this would have resonated with me if it was something more like The Warmth of Other Suns, where it's following a couple of specific people along with like a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't know, there's something about it that's like a little too easy, which I think makes it have a wide appeal, but is also like, is it gonna really stick with me? I don't know. Anyway, so that's what I'm listening to. So I am gonna keep listening to that while I make a quiche. This is a recipe I've done 3 or 4 times before. I use my mother-in-law's pie crust recipe, which is just flour, salt, and Crisco, and cold water. And then the quiche is a bacon and green onion quiche, and actually I've started substituting real bacon with like faux bacon, because there's like so many other flavors in there. Like the faux bacon works just fine, but of course it still has like eggs and cream and stuff in it, so it's not like vegan by any means. But like I'm very much like any little baby step that makes it not just like more accessible, but just like easy. So, okay, hang laundry, make pie crust, listen to audiobook. It's a plan. Okay, pie crust is made. Now I need to preheat the oven and pre-bake it. So next steps are cutting the green onions, which I have a mix of what I bought at the store, and then stuff I have grown from off-cutting. So they're getting quite spindly. They've been in my windowsill for like 6 months maybe, or like 4 months, several months. And then while I do that, I am preheating the pan and the oil to cook some of this bacon. So those are my next steps. Okay, so filming phone battery almost died, so I had to charge it for a bit, so we've skipped a few steps. I've got my green onions, which I just chop with scissors, as well as the fake bacon. I can buy my eggs and other stuff. I accidentally bought heavy whipping cream instead of light cream. It's probably going to be fine. I just did like a little less than a cup, and then I put a little bit of water in to like rinse the cup to just water it down a touch. And then my pie shell is pre-baked, so I'm ready to put in all my other ingredients. And it says to use cheddar cheese, but I knew we had a full bag of this pre-shredded Mexican style cheese that we use for quesadillas, which, like, for all my eco anxiety, what are we doing buying pre-shredded cheese in plastic bags? We find that having a few pre-prepared ingredients, like pre-shredded cheese, makes it more likely that, you know, we'll actually cook something at home rather than just ordering takeout again. And we find that, like, it doesn't go bad as fast as, like, if I bought like a block of cheese. It would get like super dry or start growing mold before we could really get through it. This pie shell's still a little hot. Yeah, so it's like, what's gonna make me like actually do some cooking from scratch instead of only about using takeout again and again. Having some prepared ingredients it's what works. Okay, quiche is in the oven. Got about 40 minutes to cook, so now I'm just cleaning up. So I'm listening to the chapter in Cultish that's about MLMs, and I want to shout out a possible companion book. So when talking about MLMs, they talk about like Protestant work ethic and like hustle culture and you know, that kind of language and that kind of like founding tenets of our country and our economic system and capitalism. So a book that like goes into that more and like really challenges it is Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devin Price. An interesting coincidence, in the last vlog I filmed, I had just finished listening to their most recent book, which is Unmasking Autism. If you are reading Cultish or just interested in like that kind of conversation in general. Like, that's a book that I think really goes into like some of the origins of like that kind of mentality and how it manifests and how like detrimental it is to our physical and mental health and how like inherently ableist it is. And anyway, I just wanted to shout that out, take a little break from cleaning up, and now I will get back to it. We have quiche success. It is fresh out of the oven. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the sizzling. It needs to cool down enough for it to be safe to go in the fridge, and then I will have breakfast for the next couple of days. Hurrah! So I decided to take a little break and have some snacks. I had some hot Cheetos, and I started to pick up a fiction book. I started reading Tertial and Eleanor by Garth Nix, which is his newest release in the Old Kingdom series. It's a series where the first book written is Sabriel. Chronologically, it's no longer the first book. So this is now book 6, plus the short stories that are in Across the Wall, which I just finished, and To Hold the Bridge, which I just finished, and then Across the Wall has another short story in that short story book collection. I was a little bit apprehensive about this one because the last book I read in the series, Golden Hand, I did not like. It was very disappointing. But this one, so I'm going in with moderate expectations. But so far, I'm enjoying it. We open with, so this follows the meeting story of Sabriel's parents, which is Tertial and Eleanor. We've just had one chapter so far from Tertial's perspective. He was an orphaned young boy who is rescued, acquired, found, I don't know, however you want to call it, by his great aunt when, there are signs that he is now destined to be the next Aborson in training. For world context, Aborsons are counter-necromancers. So this is a world where there are necromancers who will raise dead spirits and free magical creatures for nefarious purposes. There is one magical hereditary role called the Aborson, who is the necromancer who uses charter magic, which is like organized, structured, good magic, less harmful magic, less entropic. I guess like magic of creation as opposed to magic of entropy. Maybe that's one way to look at it that doesn't use the good-bad binary. So the Aborson is the magical lineage that puts the dead down and studies in various tools and magics to fight, dead spirits and free magic creatures and necromancers. And then we have the perspective of Eleanor, who is living south of the Wall. So the Wall segregates the Old Kingdom north, where magic exists always, and then the south, which is more kind of like our world, without magic, but sometimes, like, if the wind blows from the north, like, there can be magic kind of bleeding over. So Eleanor has been raised with no knowledge of magic, kind of in isolation. Well, here we go. Like, sorry, we interrupt this programming with a vlog staple. My tongue is red from eating spicy chips. Consistency! We love it, right? It's comforting, right? Great. A nefarious power has possessed somebody in Eleanor's household. And even though she has a magical lineage, she was brought up with no knowledge of it. But yeah, like, so far, I'm enjoying it. I shall keep reading. Well, no. I'm putting it down, and I'm gonna try to go wrap my head around some paperwork and emails I need to do, and I will film when I have more to report on something bookish or something interesting. Whichever happens first. Y'all, green onions are such a wild plant. So this is like a 1/4 inch of growth from yesterday. And the ones that I cut straight down are still hanging on. I kind of feel bad that I'm gonna get rid of these because they're just so spindly now. But I mean, it always astounds me that like within just like a few hours, it hasn't even been 24 hours, how much green onions will grow. Good morning. It's the next day. I have tried the quiche for breakfast. It was a success. The heavy cream didn't ruin it. If anything, the texture is just like a little bit more dense than it usually is, but like the flavor is fine. Anyway, I have continued reading Tertial and Eleanor. I'm a little bit over halfway through it. It's kind of a slow story compared to some of the other books in the series. There's not as much action. Actually, now at the a little bit past halfway, we have finally gotten some more action. Like, there was an action in the beginning when Tertial and Eleanor first meet, and now we've had another development, but it's still like not as epic of confrontations as I expect from this world. But you know what? I'd rather have a slow and steady story than something that feels overly rushed and underdeveloped. And while this is called Tertial and Eleanor, apart from that initial meeting, it has now been like several months, or like maybe like 2 months or so in their time, and they've gone their separate ways and have gone into like research and training and stuff, but haven't met again. So I thought that this was going to be more of a story of like them together, but it's more just like origin stories of them coming into their own. And we did see that Eleanor is 19. So Tertial must be like 20, 21. So, but anyway, you know what? Maybe that's good, because if these characters were traveling together this whole time, Garth would probably be trying to write a budding romance between them, and he does not do romance that well. There's something in this story that is something I like in the series, and I definitely saw it, and you definitely see it in the first book, Sabriel, is these are like, they're characters with like a fated, magical heritage destiny, so they're kind of like chosen one in that sense, but their power and their skill is like not instantaneous. Like, we see that Tertial as the abortion in training or in waiting, he has quite a bit of skills and quite a bit of knowledge, but kind of from his youth, and then kind of from like the lack of training from his aunt. There's still so much that he has yet to learn, and we definitely see that there is so much knowledge to be had, and it's not going to be learned overnight. And then also with Eleanor, we see that, she has this magical heritage that she knows nothing about, and she's painstakingly trying to learn what she can. So she's still very much a novice in that regard, but in terms of like physical fighting ability, like we have set up that like one of the people who helped raise her used to be like a performer and stage actor and work for the circus, so she has like acrobatic skills, she has juggling skills. They make reference to her being able to juggle knives and throw knives with accuracy. She's hired on as someone to help teach some stage combat, and when they see her stage combat skill, she then helps with like actual like weapons training. And like her instructor made the comment of like, hey, in learning stage combat, you're going to learn like the real combat as well, because that knowledge is going to help inform the realism of your performance. And that little bit of like theatrical knowledge in there, like that, of course, that speaks to my heart because I work in theater. But we see that like, even though she wasn't trained in like combat from a young age, it does set up that she has the physical strength and skill and some training to presumably kind of hold her own in a fight. So, this is something that I do like in this series, is like we see characters who are competent for their skill level. They don't magically become the most powerful person on the page. Like, that is, you definitely get to see the journey of them becoming better trained, more knowledgeable, more powerful people. But I mean, we got still a good chunk of the book left to go, so we'll see. We'll see. It is the next day. I went to a friend's wedding yesterday. It was just a little wedding at their house, and it was super sweet and lovely, and I got to catch up with a bunch of friends. I did finish reading Cultish. Again, like, it's interesting, but I think my feelings are kind of the same, where it's like, yeah, it's a solid 4-star, an interesting facet into... Like, here's, like, an interesting specific facet into cults and, like, human psychology, and then also just, like, language and how, like, language... Just, like, how human personality, like, interacts with language, like, kind of in all facets of life. Can you tell that I like the word facet? It's a great word. Whatever. And then I am, like, 3/4 of the way through Terciel and Eleanor. I have to say, so they are 3/4 of the way through the book, and we have still not gone into death, which is a thing in this world where you go, where necromancers and abortions can go into, cross over into the world of death, which is this river with various gates, and it's fascinating, and it is such a waste that, like, you've gone so far in the book without showing us that side of the world. Like, that's one of the coolest aspects of the world. Like, why would you not find reasons to at least, like, introduce the reader to that concept of this world? So I really hope that in their magical final battle that they have a really good, like, drawn out complex scene in there, and they aren't just like, we went in there and bound the bad guy and now we exited and now it's fine. I think what feels weird about this book is it's written in a way that is trying to both appeal to brand new readers who have never read anything else in this book, and then also kind of expand on details for people who are very familiar with the world, and I don't think, like, that really works, because, I mean, it's peppered in there. It's not, like, super info dumpy, but it's, like, a summary of everything is peppered in there. So, like, what are Charterstones? What are free magic creatures? What kind of creature is Morgim/Mogget? Like, who are the Clare? You know, so we go over that stuff, but then, like, we'll also get, like, little details. You know, so we're getting, like, little overviews of all this stuff that people who already have read the series, like, already intimately know. Which leaves very little room for, like, the expansive details. So, like, one detail that, like, kind of gets explored a little bit is, so you have the charter magic and they have these symbols. It's like, okay, well, how do you avoid casting a spell just by, like, writing down the symbols for, like, future learning? And they kind of, like, talk about that a little bit. And they kind of, you know, it kind of feels like the author is maybe, like, addressing fandom questions of, like, how does this work and how does that work, and, like, but, like, but it's just, like, kind of, like, stated in there it feels like there's very little that's new in this world, which is kind of what I'm struggling with where there is such like complexity and fleshed outness of the magic in this world that like there's so much for you to build on, but you're just kind of like rehashing the same thing over and over again. You know, it doesn't have the same pull as the core trilogy of the series. Um, so I'm just kind of like trying to investigate like how do I explain like what's missing, like what has changed from the books that I have reread more times than I can count, and then like something like this. I'll check back in later. Bye. So I finished Tercel and Eleanor. It was okay. I mean, like, I did still enjoy it, but it's, you know, there's definitely things I've talked about originally that are kind of, like, falling flat. And there were two things towards the end that kind of, like, stuck with me, of kind of, like, why did you do this? One of them, it's kind of, I think I can talk about it without it being a spoiler, but when they do their final magic, and they have this magic chain to conquer this greater dead, and Tercel like grabs the chain and goes into death. I just reread the scene to be like, would this have been possible? Because it bothered me that they didn't cast a protective shield, which in like the first couple of books is like whenever an abortion goes into death, like you cast a protective shield because your body is completely vulnerable when your spirit is in death. And okay, maybe he might have been in a rush and didn't have time to do that. And Eleanor couldn't do it because of what she was involved in. But they have Muriel the Claire, and I don't know, like, I mean, it's not a power that's specific to abortion, so couldn't Muriel, I think it's Muriel, couldn't she have cast a protective shield? Because the downside with the shield is then you can't, like, reach outside of it to fend off people, but like Mirelle could have cast a shield around them. I don't know, it was just like a little detail of like it's such like a big important thing when someone spirit travels into death in like the first major books of the series that like it feels really weird that like that's a piece of magic that's not talked about at all in this book. And then another thing is like at least twice, but definitely like towards the end, you know, Tercio gives this speech about, like, you know, I accept my fate, but I recognize that I can make it my own. Like, I can have, you know, I don't need to live my life the same way that my great aunt did. And it's kind of like, you know what? You've spent 300 pages showing the character arc of him, and then you just summarize the whole thing in three sentences, and it's like, can you not trust your readers to figure out that this is what he has learned? Like, why do you need to like spell it out? Like, it's not a middle grade, your audience isn't that young, you don't need to spell it out for them. This is what I have learned. So, I mean, like I had mentioned, I had gone into this with moderate expectations. My hope was that it would be better than Golden Hand. I think it succeeded in that, but it still doesn't hold a candle to the core three books of the series, which are Sabriel, Lirael, and Eporson. And it kind of just makes me want to like reread those three books again, especially because the audiobook of those three is narrated by Tim Curry. And he does a great job with it. And I've checked that Golden Hand, Clariel, and Terciel and Eleanor are all narrated by different people. Anyway, in summary, I'm like, yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't know. I know. Part of me is like, I want to like reread the whole series and be a completionist, and part of me is like, I could skip rereading this one, or maybe like reread it once in a while, but like not to the extent that I would reread the ones I mentioned. When the hair is clipped back, you know it is time to get to work. What am I doing today? I'm gonna do some laundry. Step 1, get that going. And then I'm finally gonna tackle cleaning the bathroom. I have proper motivation because our bathroom fan has kind of been on the fritz for a while, and it still like turns on to make noise, but it's clearly not working because like we have like the room with the shower and the toilet, and then we have a door and then a room with the sink and the mirror. And today, for the first time, the mirror was all fogged up from the shower. That usually does not happen. So that clearly shows that that fan is no longer pulling moist air out of that room. So we're going to need to put a work order in to get it fixed. And I do not want the workmen to see the current state of our bathroom. So that I'm gonna I had some other like work stuff I could do today, but like I can do it tomorrow if I feel motivated to do this thing today. I'm gonna roll with it. And I'm just gonna plug in my audiobook and we're gonna go, and it's gonna be fine. I started listening to the audiobook for Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon, and of course, like, the writing is immediately fantastic. This is a gothic horror. I think I've heard it referred to as gothic horror novel that follows a character named Vern, who uses she, her pronouns, but there is very early on a conversation about, like, gender norms being, like, Vern doesn't really seem to fit or, like, care much about them, like, very much recognizing that, like, gender norms are a social construct, and Vern doesn't really feel like she fits into them. So we find that she has run away from a cult, farmstead, but I forget what it's called immediately, of course. She's 15 and she has just given birth to twins in the woods. And she's kind of being hunted by someone from that, from the cult. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I feel like this book would pair really well with cultish. Oh, also, very important dynamic. This compound is, I believe, exclusively black people, and they call themselves, like, the descendants of Cain. And they kind of preach against white supremacy and, like, the white version of following Jesus' teachings. And I think we're still kind of, I think we're still kind of early moments in the books of kind of exploring those themes. But there's already, like, a very interesting critique of the various sides of how, like, religion is used to justify certain ideals and is weaponized against other people. And again, I think this would pair really well with the book Cultish in terms of examining, like, the language that is used within this compound, and also, like, the way it has, like, very valid critiques, but it's also presented in a way that's, like, feels weird. And the book Cultish kind of talks about, like, why are some people, like, lured in by cultish language, and why are some people, like, completely turned off by it. And I think we already are seeing that kind of dynamic, how, like, the truth and the affirmation in some of this rhetoric can be very appealing, but then also, like, I know my context is, like, that stuff is full of, like, red flags to me, but also, like, I don't disagree with the point. There's just something about the way it's presented that's off. Also, already, I highly recommend the audiobook because Vern has started singing some spirituals to calm her newborn babies, and the narrator sings them. I believe it's the narrator. It sounds like the same voice. But they are beautiful, beautiful songs. Way, way more beautiful than anything I would have been able to, like, think up in my head just reading it. So, but yeah, and then, like, overall, like, I love River Solomon's writing. I've read their book, The Deep, and I would very much like to get a copy of that one, because the writing is exquisite. I was thinking it kind of puts me in mind of a similar way that I describe James Baldwin. Like, the writing style is not, like, I wouldn't confuse them for each other, but there is something very evocative in the descriptions where, like, each of these writers will describe a setting and you will have a very clear, not just, like, physical picture, but very, like, emotional picture, like, what is the emotion of you sitting in this church, of you sitting in this forest. And it's delicious and creepy. And yeah, I should stop talking and get back to listening to it while I do my chores. Great. Hello. My headphones have a low battery notification, so I've stopped to charge them and make some lunch. I think I'm just gonna have a smoothie because it's very warm, especially scrubbing in that bathroom. I have finished cleaning the tub. I think it's been over an hour, which gives you an idea of how bad it is, but also a bunch of our enamel's worn away, so it just takes more scrubbing to get any kind of stain to lift from that surface. Anyway, still listening to Sorrowland. It's still great. I think we have just started getting some hints that living in the forest has maybe started changing Vern. Like, she had a realization that, like, the way that I kind of swung through the trees that time, that's a little odd. So, you know, there's nothing, like, particularly supernatural yet, but I think we've gotten a couple of hints that something may be happening. Something's happening. Something will be happening. We're getting a lot of backstory to Vern as a child, Vern as, basically as a child bride. Like, there's a great little moment in there about the leader of this compound saying that, like, you know, her mother's saying, like, isn't she a bit young to get married? And the leader is saying something like, well, you know, age is really like a white man's concept, blah, 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 blah. And, like, spouting this logic that isn't really logic, it's just a justification for the thing that he wants to do, the way he wants to exert his control, which is kind of an interesting concept when you think of, like, the statistics of, like, how white children are treated differently than black children in terms of guessing a child's age, assuming their maturity, and, like, expectations of their behavior, you know. And it's like, yeah, you look at statistically, like white children and children of color doing the same thing, and the way that they're disciplined differently, and the way they have different expectations, you know. Also cases like, you know, what happened with Trayvon Martin, and it's like the way that age is very flexible as a concept of power, of, like, we'll treat you like a child when we don't want to respect you, and we'll treat you like a grown-up when we want to justify a threat. Which is not really quite the conversation that's happening in this book, but it is interesting that age as a flexible concept is part of white supremacy, I guess, is kind of like the overarching theme. Anyway, okay, food. Because now that I've kind of sat down and have stopped moving for a few seconds, I'm hungry. So, time for a smoothie. It is now almost 4 o'clock, and the bathroom is clean. Took me like all day. I probably started close to like 11 o'clock. If you're like, oh my god, it'd take you like 5 hours to clean your bathroom, I'm like, well, I did probably take like an hour for lunch to sit down and make and eat, drink my smoothie and play some Breath of the Wild. And I also, like, I did a good clean, because, like, I really got in there and tried to scrub things. I scrubbed the floor, which is usually something we skip, and then also I spent some time picking out the gross accumulation in the shower drain. Ugh. But the water drain's much better now. Like, we have, like, a hair catcher, but just stuff had gotten accumulated under there. So I went in there, and it was, like, below a little bit of, like, a stopper that's built into the drain. So I had to get in there with chopsticks to kind of, like, dig stuff out, and it was totally gross. But I think it's going to be worth it for having water drain better. So even though it took me a long time, I have to remember I took a long lunch, and I did a good clean, not just to get it done clean. I also ran a load of laundry. And I also spent lots of time sitting down and like browsing through Instagram and like looking at text messages from people. And, you know, giving my brain some breaks because it was like, I'm bored. Can we be done yet? I'm like, no, we're not. Enough domestic saga. What's going on in the book? I can't remember if I've ever heard anyone talk about this. But Vern and one of her children are albino. And wrapped up in that is they have very poor eyesight. They're low vision people. So, like, Vern never learned how to read because, like, it would give her migraines. And, like, you know, she knows of, as a child, she was able to, like, see the stars with a telescope, but she couldn't see them by herself. So, like, she teaches her other child who can see, like, how to find the North Star. But, you know, she kind of now relies on him to find the North Star to see if they're going in the right direction. And like the way, like, and there's things like, you know, when she's given money, she folds it a certain way so she knows what the bill denominations are. And just like the casual incorporation of the way she and her other low vision child like move through the world, and the way that they compensate, and the ways that they are quite capable, and also the ways that they are vulnerable. It's interesting, and I don't know if I'd really heard people talk about that aspect of the story. Maybe they mentioned that, like, Vern is disabled, but I don't know if anyone specifically talked about it being, like, not completely blind, but, like, low vision enough that, like, she navigates the world through familiarity and touch cues as much as she does, like, through vision. And it's very interesting. I think I'm like a little bit more than 30% in, so, you know, we're still definitely building up what exactly Vern is running from, and like what is she running from, like what is the actual threat, and then also like she's running from her life in the compound, and like learning details of this compound are still, you know, that's definitely still a mystery that's ongoing. Man, my brain is tired. Productivity's hard. It feels like I didn't actually accomplish a lot, but like it took a lot of focus for me to do that. If I had the energy and focus for it, I would like start keeping a journal of moments like this for when I do finally get an appointment for an ADHD assessment, because like this is the kind of stuff that I've started being more self-aware of, and kind of clocking that, like, this is not the average experience. Like, it literally feels like my brain's, like, full of cotton. And it's like, I shouldn't be particularly exhausted. I didn't have to do anything particularly mentally taxing, but I think it's because I focused on a task I didn't particularly want to do and didn't like doing and have a lot of negative associations with, and actually like did it to completion. Like, again, like I mentioned earlier, the doing a full clean, not to get it done clean. And just like kind of clocking that, like, it's so mentally taxing. And then I look at my mother, who like cleans the bathroom, cleans 3 bathrooms in their house once a week, and it takes her like 30 minutes to do all 3 of them, mostly because she does it every week, so she doesn't have to scrub like I do. But the fact that like it's time for her to do that task, and that's just what she does, and like just realizing that like my brain will not do that. It will not do that. And I know like it's so hard to compare like a personal mental experience with anyone else's, just because like it's such like human language like really doesn't fully represent like everything that's happening like physically and emotionally and like neurologically, whatever. And now I'm just rambling, and I kind of want to just like make my point so I can stop talking, but I feel like I'm onto like an interesting idea here. Anyway, I started this whole thing being like, I should like write this down. I think the closest I've got is like talking about it on this vlog, and whether I actually put it in the vlog, I don't know. I might just like save this video clip for like another moment. But man, okay, I'm gonna stop filming and I'm gonna go shower. Good talk, y'all. Okay. Okay. So I finished Sorrowland. It was great. The ending was quite satisfying, like for how like dark and twisty it gets. Like the ending is surprisingly hopeful. Which I think I remember that from reading The Deep, which is also by River Solomon, where like you go through all of this trauma and challenge, and you're like, how can things end up okay? And you're like, oh yeah, I guess it does. Like, the fight's not over. Things are not necessarily going to be easy, but like, our characters do end up in better circumstances than they started, with the hope of more better things to maybe. I felt like the middle third, like the middle half to 75%, what it could have used either more discoveries or more, not necessarily action, but some kind of like forward momentum, forward energy. It might have just been because like I was mostly listening to that section when I was out driving and running errands, so like I was a little bit more distracted from it than I usually am. Oh, this book is very queer. There's quite a few explicit scenes in there, and then it's also like they're explicit, but they're also unsettling. Gothic horror, gotta love it. So you know, be prepared for that. It is wonderfully queer and wonderfully gender nonconforming. There's a great speech in there about. I will find and read the exact quote when I do my wrap up, but it's something about Vern is talking to someone who is trans, and Vern is saying like, I don't know what I am. I'm something in between. And then she mentions like, I don't want a word for it, because once there's a word for it, then that means somebody has studied it, and that means once it is named, it is there for people to hate and like for people to study and dissect. And there was comfort and like protectiveness and like not having a name and like not putting that name out into the world, like letting it be something that's just yours, which I thought was a very interesting take on a facet of being trans or being non-binary. And I think it does kind of explain why Vern still uses she, her pronouns, but then there's so much about her that's like, but you don't you don't fit, like, why are you still using these pronouns when they symbolize a structure that like you're not a part of? And there is an element of like maybe safety in not challenging it, and also like this whole like letting where you sit on that spectrum be something that belongs to you and is not really for the rest of the world to. It's not their business. And I respect that. And that's not going to be a need or a feeling that's true for everyone, but I do think like it's an important, again, like an important facet. My favorite word. Apparently, like, that's my favorite word. I'm trying to describe something as like the facet of something. It's an important facet of an important side of like being trans or being non-binary, where there's not any one way to do it. And some people are going to use their assigned pronouns and for the most part move through the world as their gender assigned at birth, but still be part of that community, and the details of it might never really be clear to anyone else, and that doesn't make it any less valid. You know, queer people, trans people do not owe you a convincing performance. So, you know, I don't think that's like a huge that's not like a huge conversation of this book, but I did really like that little conversation. It's, yeah. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and of course it makes me want to pick up An Unkindness of Ghosts, which I've been meaning to, but I'm now 2 for 2 loving books that Rivers Solomon has written. I've heard maybe that one has like some of the toughest content, maybe. But I mean, it's not like Sourland and The Deep had like easy topics at all, so it might have just been because like that was their first novel, and it was like, who is this author doing these amazing science fiction, science fantasy, speculative fiction things with these deep historical topics. And, you know, there might have been a wow factor in people's reaction to that. I wonder. I will have to read it and find out. Okay. So I've got like 1 more week of work, and I should have like 3, maybe 4 weeks after that with nothing planned. So I'll probably do some kind of vlog sometime in there, hopefully. Have a great rest of your day. Read good books. Patron your local farmers markets. Just like walk around and see the things. It's fun. I hope you have good weather wherever you are. And I will catch you folks in my next video.